Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. We appreciate you being here, whether you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or listening on Spotify or iTunes or whatever platform you're on. We appreciate you being here. While you're here, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. And please share it. Give us a 5-star review, because I know when I have guests on, like the one I have today, Brit Kelly or Sweeney, whichever you may know her by. She's an absolute star. And those of you that may not know her story, I think you're going to be really, really intrigued by it, because, you know, we hear about violence against our police officers and, law enforcement officers all the time. And in fact, if you're plugged in as much as I am, you see bulletins basically daily where officers are critically injured and some of them killed. And I know year to date, I think we've lost, well, I don't know the exact numbers, so I don't want to throw anything like that out, but it's one of the most violent years we've ever had on record. And a big part of that is because of the politics of what's going on. But there's different things that motivate the crazies out there. And some of them feel that all of their anger needs to be directed at law enforcement for one reason or another. And most of the time I've seen that kind of thing, it's because they just do not understand how society actually works and how critical law enforcement is to our entire society. And just to give you guys a little idea, imagine whether you're a husband or wife, if you're the adult in the house, imagine if you tried to upkeep your household and protect it. So imagine if there wasn't the umbrella of protection that law enforcement provided, and you had to run your business, for example. You had to go to work, and your work environment not only had to produce and be productive and provide the widgets or the service that you do for your customers, but you also had to provide your own security. And if you can't imagine that would be a surrealistic nightmare, then you don't fully appreciate what law enforcement does for us. So on that little soapbox, I want to bring in my guest, Brit. I sure appreciate you being here. We met just a few months ago in Washington, D.C. at the International Homicide Investigators Association conference there in D.C. And you guys told your story, and it occurred in 2009, from what you were telling me. And but Brit, I want you to just briefly introduce yourself and kind of set the table of what you were, what kind of the atmosphere was like back when this whole thing happened. And you know what? Just take it from there. You can tell your story a lot better than I can.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invite today. It's always an honor, and definitely part of my purpose and my hopes to tell my story. And I am flattered that you would reach out and ask me to do this with you. So interesting, going on what you were just kind of talking about with this creation of I'll say the political climate, and I don't necessarily mean political as much as, election going on, but just kind of the climate we have going on with law enforcement. And again, you mentioned that my incident, which I'll obviously speak to, happened in 2009, and here we are 15 years later, and the war on cops has just escalated in that this last 15 years, I'll even say. And so the attacks on officers just for wearing the badge and being in a patrol car is more and more common, sadly. But that's kind of exactly what happened in 2009. And in 2009, um, it it was just a very it was a different field to be law enforcement. First of all, to even get into the profession was much more difficult, and there would be 10 openings in a department. There'd be 300 applicants and such. I mean, that was kind of the more common thing, and it was a very it was prestigious. It's an honor, and it still is an honor for me. But it was just very different, back in the when I applied to be an officer 15 plus years ago. Today, obviously, with everything that's happened in the last, I'll say 4 years to be simplistic, it's departments right now are fighting to get officers to join. I work for the Seattle Police Department, and we are currently down. I think the last numbers I heard were about 400 officers. How we're even operating, I'm not sure. And obviously the citizens are kind of they're the ones paying for this because they're not getting the service that they deserve from their law enforcement um, officers. And exactly what you said, that they're actually having to go out and protect their own businesses, their own homes, etc. There's more private security than there's ever been because businesses just know that they can't rely, unfortunately, on their police department. But back in 2009, I was brand new. I had gotten hired I had tested and gotten hired in 2009, January of 2009. I'm sorry, and actually got through the process remarkably fast as far as backgrounds and such. And I felt really lucky. Again, just a difficult profession to get into. A lot of I's to dot and T's to cross with getting in. And got in to academy, and I had no background whatsoever. I had no family who were first responders. I had no family who were um, longtime military or anything. I just, honest to God, was just a calling for me that I just one day was just like, that's what I want to do. It wasn't, everybody usually has the kind of great story of, since they were knee high to a grasshopper, they've always wanted to be a cop. And I can't say that's true. I just was kind of neutral to the thought, but I feel blessed that I don't know what urged me to go into the profession, but I did, and went through academy, graduated academy August 2009. Seattle has a post academy that's, I don't know, I think it was roughly about 6 weeks that we went to after academy. And then we go to our field training, which is pretty standard for most departments, of course. Our field training was pretty standard as far as 3 rotations each, approximately a month. You were in field training for about 3.5 months total before you were released and blessed on your own. And at that time, you're still on probation until your sworn date, and you just kind of keep checking the boxes as you go. I got through my post academy with Seattle. It was just 15 years ago, right around this time. It was late September. I hit the street October 2nd for my first time in uniform and my first field training rotation, and made it through my first phase, and then went on to my second field training officer. We do 3 different training officers. Went on to my second training officer on Halloween of 2009. And it was only my second day with Brenton was the name of my training officer. And unfortunately, um, that night turned out to be absolutely horrific. Um, we we were working nights. I was working what we call third watch. At that time, the hours were approximately, I think, shift was 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. was our shift. And of course, Halloween costumes, fun. 2009 Halloween was actually on a Saturday night. I remember it was a full moon. There was just a whole lot of things that kind of came to a culmination that night. And of course, as a new officer in field training, I was extremely excited. And so, for anybody who knows the Seattle area at all, I was working out of our East Precinct at that time, which is in Capitol Hill, which is kind of the more funky part of town, to say it generically, I guess. It just was going to be probably the most fun area of the city to be working for Halloween. And so we go out on shift. We did a couple. I think we just there had been. That's right. It was also that evening was the um, anniversary of some gang shooting that happened like the year before. So they wanted us to do some drive-bys on the location, which we had done. And then we met the squad for coffee. And since it was only my second shift with these folks, I was meeting a lot of them for the first time. We were watching the costumes go by, um, and then went out on routine patrol. And while on routine patrol, I, being the good little new officer, went out and did some proactive traffic stops, which turned out to be a little chaotic for my new brain, but just enjoying my time trying to do well by my training officer. Um, it got to be about 10 o'clock. So the trick or treaters were kind of off the street. It was starting to turn into more the party crowd, less the kids and such. And Tim and I had just wrapped up one of a very long traffic stop that turned kind of messy just because there were some children that were unsecured, not in car seats and such. And so as we left the location, Tim had asked me to find a location that we could sit and debrief my traffic stop. And we happened to be in kind of much more of a, I guess, it wasn't, it was kind of more like urban area housing. It was actually a very nice area, part of Seattle. Nice homes and such, overlooked Lake Washington. And so I kind of wished we were in a more commercial area so I could find a place to park, but I just opted to kind of go down a side street and parallel parked in the only place that was available, which was actually blocking the entrance to a parking lot to a small apartment building, just because city parking is always difficult. So figured we'd be in the car anyway, not a big deal. If we were blocking a entrance, I could move. I was driving. At this time, we had Crown Vics because, again, this was 15 years ago. So we'd Crown Vics, sitting parallel parked, side of the road, teeny tiny road, small. Even though it was two-way traffic because there was cars parked along one side of the street, two vehicles could not have passed each other. So it was that type of game for anybody who knows any city driving where you kind of have to jockey in between cars and let another car go and go around. Very common in the small streets of Seattle. And that was this street as well. So again, just kind of head on a swivel, keeping eyes on vehicles going by and any people. There weren't many, again, pedestrians in this area because we were kind of off the beaten path a bit. Very ambient lighting, and we had the inside dome light on. Tim again in the passenger seat, and I was parallel parked. What was the west side of the road, which meant through traffic was to my left, was was to the driver's side, of course. And so I was sitting, Tim sitting with a steno pad on his lap with everything I did right and mostly everything I did wrong on the traffic stop to review with me. And we're just sitting there. And again, to this moment, I don't know what drew my attention to the left. I don't know if Tim said something. I don't know if I saw his look. I don't know if I heard something. My window was probably at least halfway down, maybe 2/3 of the way down, and I heard something that turned my attention to look left. I got my head to maybe about where the A pillar is in the vehicle, and could see that there was another vehicle pulled up parallel to us, so tight to us and so close to us that if I had wanted to open my door, I would not have been able to. Um, I do recall that the A pillars were about lined up, and I only got my head to as far as that A pillar when all of a sudden a blast, a muzzle flash, the smell of gunpowder, just kind of, I'm going to say blew me over, but it not literally, but just in fear. And I was able to turn and kind of bury myself into the console of the vehicle. And we were taking on gunfire. And with every round I heard, I just remember trying to duck lower and lower. And again, I'm in the driver's seat, and people always envision that I kind of slunk down, and I didn't. I thankfully didn't at the moment that we were stopped have my seatbelt on. I was able to kick my hips up, um, so that essentially my butt was against the door, and I just twisted so that my face was down towards the center of the vehicle. And again, with the Crown Vics at that time, the MDCs were a little more forward, so there was space in there. The newer PIUs don't really; they have a bigger console, so there's less room there. This had kind of a bigger gap, if you will, and that's where the in-car radio was and such. So I was able to twist and kind of bury myself that way. With every gunshot that went off, I just went deeper and deeper into the car, um, and uh, was able to realize that my face was right near that in-car, was right near the cradle of the mic for the in-car radio. And so without having to pull it out or anything, I just kind of squeezed in to the mic and went on air and said what I thought was shots fired 29th and Yesler, which was our location. Wasn't quite what I said in hindsight. Of course, under stress and such, you say some different things, which I can speak to. But the good news is I did get out on air that we were, we were taking gunfire. The gunfire stopped. It felt like, in my mind, it was an eternity, but it obviously was pretty quick that I sat up and I was looking for where the threat was and was scanning and couldn't see anything, couldn't find anything, um, and couldn't understand where this had come from. It was at that point that in my side mirror I could see movement. I could see headlights. And so that's what drew my attention and made me realize that it was that vehicle where the gunfire had come from. So the vehicle had pulled up parallel to us, next to us, and then after the barrage of gunfire on us, um, went in reverse to get out of there. So at that time, of course, 15 years ago, technology has come a long way in general, but of course with police gear as well. We had in-car camera, and that was kind of a rarity at that time. But It was pretty well known that Seattle PD had in-car camera. This subject turns out, he was very well aware and didn't want to be captured on the camera, so he chose to go in reverse. And as I mentioned, small road, not even enough room for two cars to get by each other, so there was no way for him to even turn around. He backed up until there was an opening in cars and then proceeded to do a K turn back and around. While he was backing up, um, I had the wherewithal to exit the vehicle. Um, and, I was probably, to be honest, three pulls of the trigger in at his car before my brain even caught up with what I was doing, and the realization that I was shooting back at the subject. I continued my gunfire at him until he was obviously at too far of a distance to safely shoot at him, and I wasn't sure of my backdrop at that point. And so once he was out of sight, I was pretty frustrated with Tim not getting out of the car and helping me. Um, FTO, field training at that time was, a little different, perhaps than it is now. You were definitely tested, whether it was not just your skills and your knowledge, but as far as, kind of your grit and what you're made out of, and can you handle yourself. And obviously, 15 years again, we've come a long way with more females in the profession. But even 15 years ago, there weren't that many females. So it was no secret that Tim saw me as a petite little female and wanted to make sure I could hold my own. That had been proven when we were on other calls, and I thought that it was just his. I thought that was his MO on this call as well, to be quite honest. I thought he was wanting me to figure this out myself and see if I could take the fight to these people and such. And so I was pretty annoyed that he wasn't getting out of the car and helping me. Once I realized that this vehicle had gone out of sight, and, they obviously, they being the suspect who had shot at us, knew that I wasn't, or one of us had, survived this at least. I was absolutely convinced that they were going to come back around and flank me and try to make sure to finish me off. And so I started to take cover. I had gone to the front of our patrol vehicle to make some more radio transmissions and let everybody know what was going on. And as I was trying to make my radio transmissions, that's when I looked into the front of the patrol vehicle and realized that the reason Tim wasn't getting out of the car is that he had sustained injuries that were, to be frank, just not compatible with life. And so it was at that moment that I realized, like, I had to protect myself, and whoever this was that was hunting us was gonna come back around and make damn sure they got me. So not wanting to be hanging out at the patrol car, knowing that was what had drawn this person to us, since we weren't even logged to a call. We weren't even still logged to the traffic stop that we had been on. We were literally just sitting on the side of the road debriefing. So I took cover into that same little parking lot where we had been blocking the entrance to the apartment building. I went and just took cover between a couple of vehicles and just started trying to cover down on all my threats. And again, it's a city. It was, it was not more commercial area, but there was a lot of houses. I remember there was townhomes with balconies, apartments with exterior entrances and exits. And so it just felt like there was potential threats anywhere at that time.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.